In this video, I'm going to tell you pretty much everything you need to know to make intelligent wine collecting and consumption decisions regarding the wines that are produced by iconic Lebanese producer Chateau Musar. I'm going to start out by discussing the flagship Chateau Musar Rouge, including a discussion of which vintages are showing well right now, as well as how vintage variation can impact each vintage of Chateau Musar wines. After that, I'll discuss the Hochar Rouge, which, as I'll discuss later, is not a second wine, and I'll also discuss the intriguing white wine produced by Chateau Musar. While there are a number of Lebanese wine producers that make wines that I enjoy, particularly when enjoying Lebanese cuisine, my favorite is undoubtedly still the benchmark producer from Lebanon, namely Chateau Musar. Chateau Musar is located in Lebanon's Bekaa Valley. The flagship Musar wine is a blend that consists of Cabernet Sauvignon, Cinsault, and Carignan that was planted way back in the 1930s. The vineyards that produce the fruit for this impressive wine are located at the southern end of the Bekaa Valley, and the soils are gravel over limestone, which is ideal for viticulture. Musar uses organic principles in the vineyard and has a non-interventionist approach to winemaking. The grapes for Musar's flagship red wine are fermented separately in concrete vats. They're racked about 6 months after harvest. After that, they mature for at least a year in French oak barriques, only a small percentage of which are new. After that, they spend a substantial time in bottle, at least 3 to 4 years, before finally being released 7 years after harvest. So the current release is the 2017 vintage. The Musar style is definitely influenced by Bordeaux, as one of the original owners was friends with Ronald Barton from Langlois Barton. In addition, one of their longtime winemakers spent a substantial amount of time studying and learning to make wine in Bordeaux. And in fact, when I'm tasting an aged expression of Musar, it often reminds me of a Bordeaux, but with more rusticity. This past week, I tried the 1999 vintage on 2 different occasions, and it was showing extremely well. This is a wine that's just now beginning to hit its stride, and the great thing about it is because they released some library vintages, you can still get this wine in the market for around $85 per bottle in the United States. In addition, Broadbent, the distributor, does a tremendous job getting this wine on restaurant lists, and sommeliers all over the world are very excited to have this wine on their list because it's a unique and interesting wine, and it's also fairly cost-effective. If you prefer to spend a little bit less, you can get the new releases for around $60 per bottle, but you'll definitely need to plan to let those age in your cellar for a substantial period of time to enjoy them at their peak. As the winery advises, if you give the wines more time, they will give you more joy. If you're going to be buying younger vintages of Musar to put away, you may also want to consider half bottles, as those will mature a little bit more rapidly than the standard bottlings. In some cases, I recall that some viewers also complained about Musar wines in the fact that they had some bottle variation. I've had the wines dozens of times, and they've been remarkably consistent for me, and I've never had any bad experiences with them personally. The one thing I will note, however, is when I order the wines at a restaurant, I do so at the very beginning of a meal so that they can decant for at least an hour or so before I start enjoying the wine. As with some high-quality Bordeaux, oftentimes this wine needs a lot of air to show its best. So if you just do a pop and pour, it's not going to be a surprise if your wine doesn't show its best under those circumstances. In order to fully appreciate Chateau Musar wines, and also to make the most intelligent purchasing decisions for yourself, it's important to understand that the Musar wines and the vintages can typically be categorized into 3 categories. As mentioned, there's 3 different grapes that go into the Musar Rouge: Cabernet Sauvignon, Cinsault, and Carignan, and depending on the vintage, there can be vintages in which any one of those 3 components shines or is the star of a particular vintage. For example, in vintages like 1999, Cabernet Sauvignon is definitely the star, and you get a wine that is more Bordeaux-like in character. So certainly if you're a fan of Bordeaux, you would most likely enjoy vintages where Cabernet Sauvignon dominates or is the star of the show when it comes to the Musar Rouge. In addition to 1999, Cabernet Sauvignon was the star in vintages such as 2000, 2004, and 2017. If, however, rather than Bordeaux, you're more of a Burgundy fan, then you want to seek out Musar vintages where Cinsault is the star of the blend. These are vintages such as 1997, 2001, 2010, and 2016. These wines will be a little bit more elegant and lighter in body and more Burgundian than Bordeaux-like in character. If you're interested in wine recommendations, wine collecting strategies, and learning more about wine, please do subscribe to my channel. I've been collecting wine for more than 15 years and also have a level 4 diploma from the WSET. So I have both formal certification as well as substantial practical knowledge from the School of Hard Knocks. The third category for Musar vintages is a vintage in which Carignan is the star. This does not happen very often, as Carignan is the smallest percentage of the blend of the three different grapes. However, one example of such a vintage is 2003, which happens to be showing quite well right now. So I would definitely encourage you to try that one if you're able to find it. For those of you who are excited to try Musar wines and want to know which vintages are showing well at the moment, I would definitely encourage you to try 1998, 1999, 2000, 2003, and 2004. In addition to the Flagship Musar Rouge, Musar also makes a wine that's called the Chateau Musar Hochar Rouge. In the United States, this wine sells for right around $30 and is always a compelling value. This is not a second wine, however, but it is easy to see how people could think that, as there is a bit of a resemblance in terms of the taste profile between this wine and the top wine, depending on the vintage. Notably, however, the vineyard, the composition of the blend, and the maturation process are entirely different than for the Musar Rouge. For the Hochar Rouge, the blend is typically Cinsault dominant and also includes Grenache and Cabernet Sauvignon. This is from a field blend of vines that average around 30 years of age. Unlike the Musar Rouge, the Hochar Rouge matures for only about 4 years before it's released. Around 6 to 9 months of that time is spent in oak. This wine also benefits from some air, although it doesn't need quite as much as the Musar Rouge. This wine is characterized by ripe red fruits, and it's also savory and peppery. It reminds me a little bit of a Châteauneuf-du-Pape or a GSM blend from the south of France. So if that's a style that appeals to you, you definitely may want to give this one a shot. The alcohol by volume is typically quite a bit lower than what you'll find in Châteauneuf, however, as the most recent Hochar Rouge comes in at around 13.5% alcohol by volume, and this is also a vegan-friendly wine as well. Due to the price point and the fact that the style bears some resemblance to the Musar Rouge, the Hochar Rouge is also an excellent cellar defender for the Musar Rouge. So if you're going to be buying some Musar Rouge to put away, you'll probably also want to get some of this Hochar Rouge so that you can enjoy this one rather than digging in to the Musar Rouge too soon. Chateau Musar also makes a very unique, intriguing white wine. This wine sells for around $70 in the United States. It tends to be somewhat polarizing. People either love it or hate it. This white wine is made from a blend of 2 indigenous Lebanese grapes. Somewhat unusually, these grapes are actually harvested after the red grapes are harvested. Despite this late harvesting, however, there's still naturally high acidity for this wine, and there's also a very reasonable alcohol by volume percentage of around 11.5. This wine matures in 100% new French oak for around 9 months. This is an extremely age-worthy wine as well, and in fact, it's a wine that can even outlive the very age-worthy Musar Rouge. In terms of flavor profile, this wine will often show descriptors such as lemon, grapefruit, apples, hay, almonds, and butterscotch. One time when someone gave me a rather unfair blind tasting and tried to blind me on this Musar white wine, at that time I had no idea what it was, but I guessed that it was a Rioja Blanco. And so that is probably my closest comp for this wine. a Rioja Blanco from a more traditional producer like a Lopez Heredia. So if that's a style you enjoy, odds are you may enjoy this Musar white wine as well. If you enjoy wines that, like Chateau Musar, are a bit off the beaten path, be sure to check out this video linked above, where I reveal 13 of my favorite eclectic wines.